fine with me. Yeah, so the originally announced title of this little presentation I want to make today was about academic publications, but I'm not sure that I suggested to Irina to change it to publications in general, not only academic publications, and to talk a little bit about what is the purpose of publications, what could be the sense of publications for you personally, for your careers, for Ukraine, for countries like Belarus, Armenia, Moldova. And I start maybe with a very obvious fact that publications are not the only relevant communication that all of you will be engaged in. I even suspect that most of you will in your professional careers be engaged in non-public communication, oral communication or email communication or whatever. And in a way you may think that publication and publishing is not something related to your particular plans for your future, but there is an argument to be made that not only for certain fields of professional fields, but I would say actually for most professional fields, not for all professional fields. Obviously, if you are going to become a Secret Service member, maybe publishing is not something that your employer would want you to do. But for most other professions, I would say publishing and publications can play a role. There are obviously certain professions in which you could apply a motto that comes from academia, but that not only applies to academia: publish or perish. Yeah. So if you don't publish, then you will sort of professionally perish. That goes for academia, obviously for journalism, but also for certain parts of governmental work, for certain parts of businesses. Unless you publish, you perish. Yeah? And the publishing is so central actually to your professional career and maybe also to your individual career plan. Sorry. that it is in fact crucial. The point about publishing also for you individually is that obviously you can, if you have an idea, a plan, a concept, an observation, something original that you want to say, you can communicate that privately. You can just write it down and put it in your drawer, and you can sort of send emails around and tell it to your friends and so on, and maybe to colleagues. But the problem with this sort of communication of whatever idea, concept, plan you have is that you do not have a claim then to this particular idea, concept, or plan. So it could be that you have an original idea, concept, or plan, but and that you communicate it among your friends, colleagues, that you write it down maybe, that you put it in your drawer. And if you want to have it then implemented, then until the implementation, your problem becomes that somebody else may come and have the same idea or similar idea, plan, or concept. And if you have not published it before, you cannot have a claim on it. So it can be simply a coincidence that somebody else may have the same idea, concept, plan, observation, but it can be also that it may be sort of plagiarized from you, that somebody hears what you're saying or gets an email from you and then, publishes it and says, well, it's actually my idea. And unless you have published it yourself, you do not have a claim, really. Yeah, so the publication, if you want to implement something, plays a certain role that is not just, that goes beyond mere PR and beyond mere sort of, advertising and, making yourself public, but it's also laying a claim. Once it's published, it is sort of, you have occupied this particular part of your field, or this particular plan, idea, concept, observation. So the first sort of mistake, I think, with publications is that you don't publish and that you only communicate it privately and then lose the claim to whatever idea, concept or plan you have. The second danger, I think, is that for the last, or it has become a danger in the last 20 or 30 years ago, with the rise of the internet and social media, that it is very easy now to make public your particular text, plan, idea, observation, concept, and to put it out on a website that you create yourself, on your Facebook, on whatever social media you use, and then it is public, and then you have made the claim, and then you can later refer back that you have already published it, especially if there's a date attached to it, that you have already published what you, what maybe somebody else will later claim to be her or his idea. Or, but the problem with publication merely in the internet, on some self-made website or in social media, is that, of course, these spheres of communication are suffering from enormous inflation. You know, that you have all sorts of people who publish stuff on the internet, on social media, and that even if you have a very original, a groundbreaking idea, concept, observation, it may drown in this sort of, you know, in this endless flow of far less original, far less relevant, or even dubious, fantastic, esoteric ideas that every day come through the internet and through social media. And therefore, if you want to communicate something, I think you cannot come around, and if you want to make an idea work, and if you want to lay claim around idea, you cannot get around the issue of actually publishing it and of thinking about how to publish something. Yeah? And that can be something academic, something, you know, related to business, to government, and to civil society. It doesn't matter, actually. The issue of where to publish something and how to publish something will, I think, inevitably come up if you have some sort of original idea. There may be a certain stage in an implementation of a certain plan or concept of idea where it may be wise for a while to hold it back, to not publish it, to actually do directed communication that is not public via letters or emails or conferences, closed conferences, non-recorded conferences or seminars or whatever. There may be this stage, and sometimes that may be wise to do, to actually withhold something. But as I said, the longer you withhold something and don't make it public, the larger the risk is that you can later not lay a claim to whatever you have come up with and thought about and written down. And therefore, I think at a certain point, the issue of publishing whatever idea you have will come up. That is the part about your private sort of the usefulness of publications for your private professional issues that you may have, or it may be some sort of non-private, non-professional, where you want to bring in something, you know, out of altruistic or messianic or religious or whatever, or political reasons that you want to bring forward something. There's also, I think, for countries like Ukraine, Belarus, Armenia, Moldova here, a second issue that these are all countries, even as large a country as Ukraine, that are heavily underrepresented in the international public communication sphere. Yeah? So, unfortunately, that is a very sad fact that these countries are not major powers. They have been parts of the Soviet Union, Tsarist Empire before, and therefore they are not well represented in international academia, in teaching, in historical writing, in media. even in the analytical departments of the governments, because simply the languages are rather small, or they are seen as non-essential. Basically, in this whole post-Soviet area, you can get around with, you can get your way around with Russian. You don't need actually, you know, Armenian or Belarusian or Moldovan or Ukraine. There will be always enough people who will understand enough Russian to get around with it, and therefore, and for many other reasons, these countries are underrepresented. And again here, the issue then becomes, if you want to do something against that, and if you want your country and yourself as a representative of your country be better represented internationally, and not just on your own national playground. And I'm not going to talk here now about publishing in Ukrainian in Ukraine, or in Moldovan in Moldova, or in Belarusian in Belarus. If you want to publish in English, in French, German, Spanish, or in another international language, again, the question here becomes is where to publish. Again, you can sort of, you know, the easiest way is, you publish it on your Facebook, and then, and perhaps in another language as well, in whatever language, foreign language, or you put it somewhere on the internet. But again, you encounter here this problem that you have this stream of generic text flows where whatever you may put out there somewhere in the internet will simply drown in the general flow. Some people manage to create their own media, their own websites, video blogs, or whatever, that then become popular, and where you then actually reach a wider audience, and where you can actually exert some impact. But that is a long work. You have to, and you have to invest energy, time, perhaps even money to create a media of your own that then will actually reach either a mass audience or a particularly relevant elite, or exclusive, let's put it that way, audience. That is possible. If you have plans for that, I would encourage you maybe to try. But nowadays you are entering, you know that, of course, a very crowded field. Yeah? So to create a new media is not media outlet, whatever, whether it's a newspaper, a website, a magazine, a video channel, is not easy, because there's already so much out on it. And then again, you sort of, if you don't have the resources and the talent to create really something totally new, again, you're back to the issue where and how to publish whatever you want to publish then. And there, I would say in general, I think for your career, also for whatever cause you may be trying to push forward, and also if you want to publish for patriotic reasons, so to say, to bring your own country forward, the high art of publishing is to get whatever text, idea, observation, analysis, conclusion, solution you have, to bring it out into a generic media. A media that is sort of, perhaps has a disciplinary focus, but is not regionally or nationally limited. That is not something that is focused on, let's say, on Ukraine or on Eastern Europe or the post-Soviet area, but that ideally would be something that is sort of addressing a world audience. Maybe not all people of the world, but at least, let's say, all specialists in the entire world in one particular field. Yeah? So that would be the high art of really doing something for yourself, and also for your country, for your cause, whatever it is. Yeah? So that would be, at least that's what when I'm trying to publish, is that I'm trying to get it out somewhere that is not specialized on Ukraine and on Eastern Europe. I have here this maybe just to put around two of such academic or semi-academic journals that just the very name of it basically says it already. You know, world affairs or survival is the name of the other journal that you can have a look in. These are, you know, these are journals in this particular, and it does not have to be journals. I'm just taking them here because, you know, this is where I'm publishing. That if it is a generic website or a generic newspaper or whatever other media you can think of that may actually have a much wider reach than a journal like that that is sort of semi-academic, as I said. The real issue here is that, you know, you can therefore then address, as I said, experts in your particular field that are not just located somewhere in a particular region, but that may be in totally different regions. There may be occasions for unexpected comparisons, similarities, where you observe something that, let's say, is relevant for Ukraine, but is also observed in similar ways in Indonesia or in Colombia or so. And these comparisons then can be very useful and enlightening and you know, perhaps even innovating for your particular cause. And you can only reach, obviously, these people who are in totally different regions of the world via such generic outlets that do not have a regional focus. So that is always what I would suggest to you to try. And you know, this is an endless topic, basically. I've put out here some on this table. This is the on the right side here, specialized journals in international relations, but for other disciplines, these would be other outlets. If you have an idea, if you can get it out into a generic website, journal, magazine, newspaper, I think that would be always the first thing to do. There's also then the issue of rankings, as you know, with many other things in the world. There are rankings of journals, of websites, of their impact, their reputation. I would, you know, encourage you to look it up. There's also, if you go into an academic career, then this would be, or also perhaps in other fields, it would actually be for yourself, could for yourself be important that you, maybe that's my phone. It may be for yourself useful that you publish in a highly ranked international journal, website, newspaper, whatever, yeah, because that will also then something that you can put into your CV. There are, if you go into academia, you know, certain citation indices like Web of Science or Scopus, where basically only journals get in that have peer review, so-called, where the manuscripts that are published are first examined by colleagues, so-called peers, reviewed, criticized. Many of them are then rejected, actually. The most highly ranked journals are usually the ones which reject a lot of submissions. You know, that is one of the frustrating things if you are in publishing and if you want to go for generic journals that are widely read, that have a high reputation, that the likelihood, of course, the higher you go, the higher is the likelihood that you get rejected. But still, I would encourage you to do so. These widely read outlets with a high reputation, they are selective, they get lots of submissions, but if you have something that you want to publish, if you think it's relevant, I would encourage you to try it out. There's always then also the question whether you can submit the same text, let's say, to several outlets at the same time. If you're going for very selective outlets, I think the likelihood that two or more will take your text sinks. So I would say the risks of submitting the same text to several outlets is so to say, sinks the more selective the outlets becomes. So, you know, I'm usually, when I have a text, I send it maybe to 3 or 4 very selective outlets at the same time, assuming that the likelihood that 2 of them or 3 of them or all 4 of them will take it is very low. Actually, the likelihood that 1 of them will take it is low. So therefore, I mean, I had a couple of embarrassing situations where indeed, and maybe you had these experiences as well already, or will have them, that suddenly 2 very otherwise selective editorial boards are interested in whatever you submit to them, and then you have to sort of negotiate it because you don't want to upset them by publishing in parallel, although that also happens. Anyway, so this is, I would say, always the way to go. I think it is also especially important for such countries as Ukraine, Armenia, Belarus, Moldova, because they are underrepresented in these general outlets. So whenever you come to this stage, I would encourage you to try first to go for the disciplinary journal or the specialized journal that is not regionally focused and that is not focused on your country. Yeah? That is, I think, always the highway to do. Then comes the sort of second category of journals that I think is still also often a good choice. I've just got a couple of examples here. These are just, from my fields. They, this is just examples of journals, outlets, and I've listed here some of the specialized on Eastern Europe websites and journals. Here you can be much more specific. When you submit your texts to the generic outlet, sometimes you will have to actually make an introduction where you first explain why this particular topic that is relevant for Ukraine, Moldova, Armenia, or Belarus should be also interesting for people not living in these countries, or not in the post-communist area, not in Eastern Europe, somewhere on another continent. If you publish in a regionally specialized journal or outlet, then obviously you don't have to do often this sort of explanation. You can assume already a previous knowledge. You can go right into the topic, maybe start with a comparison of 2 East European countries, something like that. So this sort of introduction is not necessary. In general, I would say these outlets then are, by definition, almost less selective than the generic ones. It's easier to get in. The relevance is clearer. The amount of submissions they get is lower. The selectiveness often is also lower. And that would be also, I mean, for my purposes and perhaps for yours as well, that would be always then the second step. And there may be certain occasions where actually you can skip the generic journals out, because really your audience that you want to reach is not the world or the entire discipline from Japan to California, but is actually located. Your audience is located in Eastern Europe, or the experts around the world that are researching, writing about Eastern Europe. Then you may also go to straight away to the regionally focused journals. And then also there is, of course, ranking. So then look up the rankings. Usually you can simply Google, ranking journals, something, and then you will find these journals. In academia, for instance, it's so if you want to find out the most influential journals on Eastern Europe, you may go, for instance, into a generic political science ranking of journals. That's my field. And then you will see where in the generic political science or international relations ranking, the ones focused on post-Soviet affairs, on Eastern Europe, are located. And then these will be the obviously most influential. Yeah. So, you know, I mean, it depends on also what you think about your own text, your own idea, your own plan. If you think it's something really important and innovative, you know, then I would rather go for the more highly ranked journals, and that you see in some comparative account assessed as having a high so-called impact factor, a large readership, being published by a reputed publishing house. And then the last choice, and sometimes that may be your first choice, these are the outlets that are focused on Ukraine. There is now around the world, I see it in Germany, a growing circle of people who are becoming interested in Ukraine. I think, by the way, that this recent scandal with Trump and Zelensky in the US is actually good for Ukraine, because it puts Ukraine on people's mental maps. And, you know, people start to read more about Ukraine, get more interested, and there are Ukrainian studies emerging in the last 30 years since the emergence of Ukraine as an independent state. And so it may also be useful and sometimes even preferable to submit your text to a Ukraine specialized journal or outlet. I've just brought one of them here. Ukraine Analytica is the name. It's produced in Odessa. But there are, and many of these Ukrainian specific outlets, they are, of course, designed and produced by Ukrainians, sometimes by a diaspora Ukrainians, sometimes by Ukrainians here in Ukraine, but also by non-Ukrainians. Yeah? So, for instance, in Germany, we have 3 internet outlets that are specialized on Ukraine. They publish in German, Ukraine Nachrichten, published by a German who lives here in Ukraine, in Kiev. Andreas Stein, I know him, but he's from Dresden. The server of the Ukraine Nachrichten, Ukraine News, is in Dresden, but he's a German, and he lives here in Kiev, but he's a German and producing this website, which is mainly translations of Ukrainian press reports from Ukrainska Pravda, Zerkalo Tyzhnya, and so on into German. There's a sort of semi-academic outlet also produced in Germany at the University of Bremen called Ukraine Analysen, Analyses of Ukraine, which is produces longer texts by experts on Ukraine, Ukrainian experts on Ukraine, but also non-Ukrainian experts on Ukraine. That is a more sort of research-focused outlet. And there has recently appeared a new website called Ukraine Verstehen, which is attached to a new think tank in Berlin called the Center for Liberal Modernity, and that also, you know, is commenting contemporary Ukrainian affairs from a sort of pro-Ukrainian, if you like, position, and is trying to influence basically Berlin's political elite with this specialized information. These, and there are others. There is the Ukraine Crisis Media Center has a German website. Euromaidan Press has a German website. Stop Fake has a German section. And I'm just talking here about Germany because that's the country I know best. And I guess you could have similar similar presentations on France or Spain or Sweden or other countries and say something then about that. But these, maybe the more important ones here are again the English language outlets. They are more widely read, and there's a wide range of English language outlets specialized on Ukraine, produced mostly in Ukraine, but not only in Ukraine, that are read by the experts. in academia, in government, in journalism, and so on. And these specialized outlets also need to be fed. Yeah? So they are also looking for texts, and it does make sense to publish there. So although I would in generally always advise to go first for the generic ones, the non-regionalized, specialized, then if you cannot place your text there, to go to the regional Eastern Europe post-communist focused outlets. The Ukraine-focused outlets also need to be fed, yeah, and you can even make an argument that perhaps sometimes feeding these Ukraine specialized journals or websites with deep analyses of Ukraine is more important, because you'll then immediately reach people who are actually interested in Ukraine and who may be looking for specialized information on Ukraine, and they will rather go to the Ukraine specialized outlets and not to some generic outlet, and actually look for specialized information there. And these are also important outlets. Some of them are quite influential. The Ukraine Alert of the Atlantic Council, for instance, is widely read. And as I said, in connection with the war in the Donbass, with the scandal in the US, with the sanctions regime, the range of people who read about Ukraine is, at least in my impression, widening with every year. So there are more and more people who are actually interested in Ukraine and who are reading even these specialized outlets. So when you publish something there, it will not get lost. And again, there is a certain ranking. You could, for instance, if you want to place something with a Western think tank, several think tanks have now special sections on Ukraine. You can then look into a think tank ranking, where you then would decide where to first submit your text. The submission, as you may have already perhaps experienced yourself, when you submit a text, is an often frustrating process, and it's, in my experience, after decades of publishing, it's a basically unpredictable process without any fixed rules. So the announced rules of most of the outlets that you will come across is that, this is all, quality driven, it will be reviewed, there's an editorial board that will, pay attention, every editor will read your submitted text, there will be perhaps peer review if that's an academic journal, and this is all very sort of all regulated, and there's a sort of rule of law in the submission process, and the rules are laid out, and if you only follow the rules, if your text is good, you get it published. Yeah? That's the ideal world. The real world is sometimes more complicated, knowing people, knowing which address to send it to, sort of who is important in the editorial board, or knowing an author who has already published in that outlet, who was already in contact with the editor. Unfortunately, often it is that way, and I think that has simply something to do, especially with the more popular outlets, that the editors are drowning in submissions, and they cannot actually, they don't have the resources to follow actually the procedure, the ideal procedure that they may want to follow, and they may have even announced that they would follow on their website. This will be all read by every member of the editorial board, and they will discuss and so on. But the amount of submissions actually makes it impossible, because they get so many texts that that there is some pre-selection, some filter, and to get through this filter may often be quite important. And also what of course plays a role is when you submit a text, whether you've published already. Yeah? Again, I think most of the outlets would announce that this is not important, that your name is not important, your biography, but it does play a role. It does not play in many of the Western outlets such a role as in, I would say, in the post-Soviet area, where, you know, sometimes these outlets are totally driven by what is called, well, blood, or, you know, sort of, you know, somebody knows somebody, and, you know, it's paid for, or these things. You know, this is, you know, these sort of nepotistic, you know, build on clan structures or whatever. You know, there are actually, you can, even as an unexperienced and non-prolific author, you can place, I know it for sure with academic journals, actually the very selective academic journals are sometimes the most objective ones. They have the least of these informal filters, yeah? So they will actually put your text into the most objective kind of review process. But also the others, you know, there will be usually more openness, and the sort of personal networks will usually, I would say, on average, play less of a role than, I mean, maybe that's a bit harsh and also a prejudice, but I would say in general, on average, these sort of informal mechanisms will play less of a role, but they also play a certain role. It's a sort of a gray zone in between this purely informal mechanisms and the fully formalized mechanisms. Yeah, so these are some suggestions I have so far. I could go on and talk more, but maybe I'll ask for questions that you may have. It's a bit complicated here because I've tried to address basically all kinds of publishing profiles, you know, from highbrow academia to just news publishing and perhaps even yellow press publishing, which can be also important, you know, this sort of yellow press, because many people read it. So placing something there may be sometimes more useful than putting it into a too intellectual outlet. Yeah, I mean, the peer review is something that refers mainly to academia, but maybe the interest here for you, for those of you who do not want to go into academia, is that whatever discipline you enter, at a certain point, you know, if you go into business or government or NGO sector, there will be, you know, you may encounter a certain gray field where then this non-academic field will blend into the academic sphere, and where it may actually become important to publish a particular text in an academic journal, because this sort of academia gives a certain, you know, a certain flair, a certain particular flavor and reputation to a text if you publish it in an academic journal. Yeah? So therefore, it may also be important for non-academics to know about this. Peer review ideally functions in a way is that you send in a manuscript that has not your name on it, and where in the text of the manuscript the name is not, or the author is not recognizable. You know, you cannot, also in the footnotes, for instance, you will not refer to yourself. So it will be a blind review from the side of the reviewer. So the text you get will be sent to a reviewer, to the peer, to a colleague that will know your field, and who will know your field and who will assess your text, the quality of your text. And ideally, this is blind review on this side, that the reviewer will not know whose text that is, will not know your biography, your kind of connections that you may have, the kind of professor you may have worked for, where you defended your master thesis or dissertation. So it's totally blind, you know, and that is a very good thing, because it then takes out this sort of informal mechanisms, yeah, when people see a name and, I know his sister, and, you know, I will then, you know, give him a good mark because I know his sister, or I met him at a conference, or he is my friend's student, or something like that. So this is very good. And then also, ideally, the peer review will be blind on the other side, that you, when you submit your text, you will also not know the name of the reviewer who has written the negative or positive or sort of moderate review that you get. Yeah? So you get a text, an assessment of your submitted text, and if it's well organized in a proper academic journal, you as the author will not know who wrote that assessment. Yeah? That takes also a lot of problems out of it, because the review may be, for instance, negative. The review may be simply, this is unpublishable, and it has been disrespectful by the author to submit such a bad text to our reputed journal. That could be, this is the language that reviewers in academia sometimes use. How could you even dare to submit such a bad text, and take my precious time to read and assess it? And the reviewers can do that because the author will not know the name of the reviewer. So the reviewer can be very free to go and take your text apart. But it's also, it's also for yourself. You don't have to. You get the text. You don't have to think, oh, who is now who has said, and this is then called the double-blind review. Yeah. So the reviewer does not know your name. You don't know the reviewer's name, and and it's only about the text and the assessment of your text. And these personal things are taken out. This is the ideal peer review, and it can be a very harsh process, but you shouldn't take it too seriously. When you get a bad review, often these are very individual. For instance, you may come out of a particular school, you may be somebody who is left-wing from your worldview and your text, and this expresses yourself in your text somehow, your left-wing views, and then the text is sent to a right-wing expert who will think that, this is, all these leftish blah, blah, we don't need that in our reputed journal, yeah, and all the other way around, and then you send it to another journal that may be even higher ranked than the first one, and there somebody more sympathetic will read it and they will take it with So these are still very individualistic assessments. There's no objective review. There's no objectivity to it. It's you get only subjective assessments of your text, and you have to have very very thick. You have to be very strong, sort of internally. To resist then such harsh critique that you may get, and then to go on and submit it again and again and again. Yeah? And sometimes it can take years before you get your text published. That is the bitter fate of academic publishing, but that's how it is. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, that happens actually a lot, because especially the narrower the field becomes, the smaller is the circle of people who work on it. Often, if you have a very narrow topic, you simply know all the persons by yourself. You've met at conferences, you read, and you will already guess from the language, from the topic, from the question asked, from the sources quoted, who could it be? But maybe you can't be sure for 100%. Who knows? Maybe that's a student who has just graduated, whom you don't know about. Well, this happens, yes. But review is still useful. And some people, some journals, they don't have blind review. They basically disclose, or they have internal review where the editor. Where it's not sent out to outside reviewers, not in the editorial board, where the editor herself or himself will review your text and will then write you back, you have to change this and that for us to publish it, and then it's open. There's nothing double blind about it. It's neither blind from your side nor from the other side. So peer review is always the the high standard is double blind, that nobody knows actually, and that the editor is merely the moderator of the discussion between the reviewer and the author. And most of the sort of most academic journals, they do it that way, and that is also then a criteria for these journals to get into the citation indices like Web of Science or Scopus, and but that is not always observed, and sometimes even not necessary. Sometimes you can also, if you know your colleague, you can be open and say, this is not really ready for publishing, and among good colleagues, this will usually be taken well and seen as a friendly help and not as a sort of degrading.
Well, I understand that as we have here conflict in Ukraine, and this is like a hot spot on the map, recently became, the interest increases to the political situation in Ukraine. But I wanted to ask your opinion. Well, I'm a lawyer, so I usually write about some legal regulations, some relationships, and I'm just wondering about your opinion. What do you think? Whether it's interesting for Western readers, let's say, and probably some specific topics. How do you think, what would be interesting for them? This is the first question, and the second, probably you can give some practical recommendations. Well, there are a lot of them, how to choose a journal, yes, for your publication, but probably you can give some, from your experience, something which would be maybe names, or maybe how to because I totally understand that there is a rank of journals, and I totally understand that nobody will take me in some Cambridge journals or something like that, like in these highest position journals. Not necessary, but still, maybe I'm just. It's like maybe we have been talking about the problem of self-esteem for women in Ukraine. Maybe it's a bit of a problem, but still, I'd like to start from maybe not the highest positions. Well, maybe some of your practical recommendations, how to look for a journal, and what kind of topics would be interesting for Western.
Yeah, about the topic I've indicated a little bit. If you, as I said, I would always recommend to try to go into this sort of generic outlets that are not regionally focused and not focused only on Ukraine, because then simply, and there always the challenge will be, how do you make it worth reading for somebody who has no specific interest in Ukraine, and then that's a big challenge then, why would that person read that, well, and there's, and there can be different ways, so to say, to the heart of the reader, it could be an original question, it could be connecting this Ukrainian conflict to some larger conflict that is also relevant to the reader. One of the issues here often is that that is used in my field in international affairs, but maybe also for law, that would be for international law relevant, is the whole connection of the conflict to the international regime for the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons. That is the famous Budapest Memorandum, and there is this international treaty for the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons, and and Ukraine once had a large nuclear weapons arsenal, gave it away, gave it to Russia actually. Russia can have nuclear weapons according to this treaty, NPT, Non-Proliferation Treaty. Ukraine cannot have nuclear weapons to the Non-Proliferation Treaty. And obviously the fact that Russia has nuclear weapons and Ukraine does not have nuclear weapons is related to the conflict, and to the Western behavior towards the conflict. And then, you can make, and because the non-proliferation regime is something that is relevant for all people on the world, Obviously, all people in the world should be interested in the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons, Nobody wins if more countries obtain nuclear weapons. And this conflict undermines the logic of the regime, because It allows Russia to have nuclear weapons. It forbids Ukraine to have. So this is one of the ways you can then sort of, if you can make this connection, you know, or other. I mean, this is difficult. Or you know, it could be about the environment. It could be about ideals, perhaps. Sometimes ideals, I think, are overvalued. I think I've seen in Germany too many Ukrainians coming and telling the Germans that they are defending Europe in the Donbass against the barbarians in the east. That doesn't fly in Germany. You know, it's usually people think, well, we are out of this. You know, barbarian Europeans. This is not our world. But sometimes it can be about these sort of idealistic issues. It depends on the topic, or it can be simply an original. You know, you can provide Ukraine. You can say Ukraine is just a case of this larger problem that exists everywhere in the world, and let's see how it plays out in Ukraine. Yeah, so that would be obviously then an approach.
So I believe it won't be interesting to read how some specific relations are regulated in Ukraine. It would be interesting if it's like a common problem, right?
Yeah.
And probably we have solution or we have some thoughts about.
Yeah, and others can learn from that. What can be compared.
This be a bit opposite. For example, if it's political situation, people are interested in what is going on inside the country. If it's like legal field, this should be some common.
Well, ideally, yes. If you can say, you know, things like that have happened in world history and in other regions before. In Ukraine, we have this also, but in Ukraine, it's different in this way, it's similar in that way. You know, that you come out of from another context and then say this is a human issue actually and not a Ukrainian issue, but it plays out in Ukraine in the following way. Yeah,
I was thinking about opposite, not that about things which were in the history before, but about things which are going to happen, like some digital stuff or something. About this regulation.
Exactly. This sort of. Where others can learn from the Ukrainian example and from Ukrainian reactions.
Yeah, because nobody knows where this breakthrough will happen, like in which country will find ways to regulate.
Yeah, and then if you can make this connection that, you know, this happened in Ukraine and look, you know, what, but it can also happen in your country and in every country, and you know, and therefore you need to, you need to read about Ukraine not because you would be interested in Ukraine, but you care about your own country. Yeah, this is the obvious way to go.
And what about choosing a journal?
Well, I mean, you know, in law, I wouldn't know how to do that. You know, I mean.
How do you usually do that? How do you usually do that?
I mean, you know, there's just there are the big associations, I mean, for academia, it's very easy. You have, you know, the International Political Science Association, or in social sciences, often the American associations are actually the leading ones. In sociology, in economics, political science, and whatever, you know, they're just, you know, also if you look at the university rankings, usually the US universities are overrepresented. But you'll find the rankings. I mean, you know, there are lots of rankings nowadays. There's a think tank ranking, the readership rankings. Yeah, I mean, you can Google that basically, and then.
One more short question: how long does it usually take, this procedure of peer review, and like when it's double peer review?
It depends on the journal. I mean, some of the good journals, they may take 2-3 years, you know, from the submission till the actual publication. You know, and then that is also a problem if you have something very topical that is in a flow, that is a flowing process. You know, in 3 years, what you've submitted is already out of date. You know, things have changed.
Field, you can get solution.
Yeah, but in other fields too. I mean, you know, it comes out and the reader gets it and says, well, but this is, you know, already, as we say in Germany, the Schnee von gestern, the snow from yesterday.
Do they allow to make changes due to the long period of the review? Or they change?
Good question. Well, I mean, well, if you then make changes, the changes would have to go into review again, you know, and then you will be in an endless circle of. Therefore, you know, yeah, sometimes obviously you can make changes, especially if simply things change on the ground and there are new laws or something. But if you change the text, then it's a new text. And
changes due to changes in the laws, or
I don't know. I mean, the journals are also very idiosyncratic. I mean, things happen. I've seen things happening to my texts that I never thought would happen to them. You know, where entire new paragraphs that I have not written appear there, or you know, the structure is changed, or you know, whatever. And you know, you're not even asked. You're not even informed in advance about the changes. Or you get the message. Your text will be published, and then it's not published. You know, because somebody decided no, let's leave it out, and you were never told. So you need a thick well, you need a strong sort of nerves for publishing. You know. And that's also why I have become a little bit, you know, undisciplined in my submissions. You know, I usually, you know, every editor will tell you, you should only submission to one journal at one time. You know, one text to one journal at one time. You know, but the journals are not as, many of the journals are not as disciplined themselves. You know, they may sort of they do not get back to you. They may never, you know. So that's why you can sort of, you can also be, you know, with the rules, adapt the rules a little bit to your needs.
So you're speaking about this potential inverse situation in both journals and sector. So how do you usually negotiate it? I mean, those nuances are not something that
Negotiate what?
Well, I mean, most of the editors also know the situations in which the authors are in, and sometimes there are, you know, things happen that, you know, you submit a text, you don't get for a long time an answer, you write back again, you still don't get an answer, then you take the non-answer to be a negative answer, you submit the text somewhere else, and then 2 weeks later you see your text published, actually, in the first one, where you never got a reply from. This has also happened to me. And then, you know, you can just, you know, line out what happened, you know, that, you know, I couldn't, I'm sorry about, you know, usually, well, sometimes you can sort of also publish, you can adapt texts, you know, you then, if for instance there's intensive review and intensive editorial work on the text, sometimes what happens is you have one text, you submit it to 2 outlets, and it goes to so much review and editing that actually at the end you have actually 2 texts about the same topic, but then it's sort of legitimate because, you know, you see here I have one, there's another one, and, you know, this is a very effective way of publishing. Has also happened to me. And, you know, but sometimes the editors then may notice that, you know, they see, you know, this looks very similar to what we just published. How does that come? But it's not, but it's a different text, you see. Yeah, it makes the same argument, but why not make the same argument twice? Yeah, some outlets even don't care. You know, some say, you know, they would say, okay, you know, it appeared there for this audience, we'll republish it here with us for another audience. You know, it's good enough for us, you know. For instance, they are, you know, and that can be objectively the case, you know, that you know, you may have some text that goes out into a region-specific journal and is published there, and then or an outlet. I have actually had this happening several times, that they would, can we republish the text that you have already published there? Because, you know, we have our readership and we want to bring it to them. You know, sometimes, you know, and then there's also a way, I haven't talked to you about book publishing, which is yet another. Sometimes there's an argument to be made to collect already published texts into a collected volume. If you have yourself lots of published texts, you may then bring out a book with your already published texts in a book, because sort of it will be then assembled. Or texts on a particular topic that have been published in various journals, perhaps in various languages before, and then you bring out a book in one language with all the texts collected on this topic in one place. Then usually you would have to ask for the copyright from the original publisher. So the original publisher should give you then the permission to republish your text, and sometimes the original publisher, that is then a matter of negotiation, will ask for a fee. Actually, they will say, we have obtained, you have signed an agreement with us, given us the copyright. If we now give you the right to republish your text, we want from the publisher of the book where the text is going to be republished, a fee to the original publisher. And then the second publisher may say, no, we are not ready to pay the fee, and then you have a problem. Sometimes you can then rewrite the text again to make it different, but with the same argument, and then republish it. Usually you can find then a way around. But anyway, I don't want to make it too much about academic publishing, because many of you will, I guess, not go into academic publishing. But most of the things that I've said is only about publishing if you are not in academia. As I said, there will be often situations where a certain observation, concept, plan needs to be put out, because otherwise you lose the claim to it. Not just for advertising your idea or plan, but also to say, now I've said it, I've published it, and I've occupied this particular field. And whoever is going to then later on publish or talk about this idea would have to be, in a way, then perhaps even be obliged to refer back to me, and you could then even say that, somebody else plagiarized my idea that I had already published 2 years ago in this outlet, and look at the date when my idea was published, and look at the date on when when the other person came out with the same idea. This is, this is obviously something similar. I mean, this is an extreme situation, but it does happen that things become plagiarized, and publishing is then a sort of an insurance policy for yourself as well. But also, of course, it has it's simply bringing out much of your work, I think, will be, whether you, not only in academia, but also in business and government, will be getting things out in the public, whatever it then is, a product, a text. And then the whole issue of where to do it and how to do it becomes important. And then the outlet, the reputation of the outlet, the readership of the outlet become all very important. So there's a strategic issue here always involved with that. Questions? Yep. My own review experience. Well, I mean, in this sort of informal way, it can play a role that you establish a relationship with a journal for which you review. Obviously, they are then, because often that is unpaid. I mean, that is one of the sad things also about, academia, that it assumes, you write recommendations, you write reviews, you communicate with students, and, and there's no way that this is somehow then accounted for in your salary. So there is this sort of informal aspect. But no, usually, I mean, the ideal of double-blind review is that all of these side effects, it's only the quality of the text. you know, from whomever it comes, should not play ideally a role. Whether it's a professor, a student, whether the person has a relationship with the journal, professional or private, or family relationship to the journal, that all should not play a role, obviously. Yeah, I mean, with the reviews, I mean, again, don't overestimate it. It's this, I mean, the other thing that maybe is important here to remember is that when you engage in this review, you have to keep in mind that usually the reviewer will not be paid for it, and don't expect too much. They will read it only, they will skim through it often, yeah, and they will try to, you know, because you don't have the time to, unless you're very interested in the topic, then you may read line by line. But I sometimes, sometimes you, as an experienced reviewer, you know already, you know, this text, no, this is sort of, it starts already the wrong way, it has the wrong literature in the footnotes, or insufficient literature, then you can already, after reading 2 pages, you know already this is unpublishable and should be rejected. Sometimes you do that.
Speaking about whether there is any difference probably between the project proposal review and the paper review. Have you participated in this?
Project proposal review. Yeah, I mean, project, like applications, this is often more formalized and sometimes even paid for, you know, the sort of commissions that are then formed. That's slightly different. I'm not that experienced. I've been in these commissions, but not in so many. Yeah, I would say in general the same applies here as well. The same rules. Ideally, it's sort of only about the project itself, not about the person of the applicant, but sometimes, you know, the applicant has some sort of acquaintances and there are then these ideological preferences sometimes. Yeah, but that's a different, maybe I don't know enough about that to judge that. Yeah, so I encourage you to, you know, to all, it's not that difficult actually to publish, you know, because I see it from Germany now in the last years, the amount of publishing opportunities has grown. You don't need to put it anymore into your social network or just on some website that you have created yourself. You can usually find an outlet that will publish your text. If I'm not so sure how it's with Armenia, Belarus, or Moldova, but for Ukraine there are now so many outlets. I would say that have appeared in the last few years that you can usually find somewhere to publish a text that is about Ukraine.
How do you estimate this procedure? Like, is it necessary? I mean, nowadays everything changes so fast, and it takes like up to 2-3 years to review this material and publish this when it's not updated anymore. So maybe we don't.
Well, for some fields it doesn't play such a big role. I mean, in some fields they develop so slow that it doesn't, you know, or the topics are so narrow. The research field is so small that, you know, there will not much happen actually during the 2-3 years to this 2-year field. For some, that's a problem, and there's a discussion about. There's now this there are these ways of open review that you put out your text somewhere, you know, into a specialized social network where you ask your colleagues to review, and I've seen already some discussions to revise the review process and to speed it up, to make it more effective. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe I'm not deep enough into this to know what's going on there. You know, I think you know, for you, you don't need to know all of these backgrounds. You know, it's just a matter of what I wanted to do here is to lay out different strategies, how to go for something, and how, you know, what you may end up with. So, but there's a debate in academia about these about speeding this up, because indeed the general speed of research is increasing. That's true.